I'm Derek Catto, West Lothian Council. It's a question for either Duncan or Jonathan. I was interested in the women's group that you were talking about. We've currently got an issue of, we've had 2 different sets of families over the past 2 years. The new set of families are very, very conservative, and under no way are any of their wives allowed to self-travel. Have you come across anything like that?
Okay.
That hasn't really been an issue with our families. I mean, the way that we sold the women's group was by saying this is an additional to the ESOL programme, of which people were kind of happy to go along to. Then, as part of this, the Inspired Women course covers things like confidence build and assessing what your goals and aspirations are and so on. So there really wasn't any kind of opposition to anyone attending this. It's not just we've got the Sterling Syrian women, we've also got women from out with the Syrian community, so it's a much bigger mix, and we've also got some of the women from Falkirk, the resettled families in Falkirk. I mean, most of our provision is mixed. Certainly the language provision is all mixed. I think the key thing we found was ensuring that the childcare was sorted at the beginning so there were no excuses. We also dangle a bus pass for the first year. We dangle the bus pass there saying, look, if you want the bus pass is there for access and language classes. If you don't attend, you don't get a bus pass. Now, in reality, I have no way of not providing it, but that has helped encourage, there is this, obviously, this wider impact. You lose your bus pass, you lose your ability to kind of go out and, go shopping and so on, and travel in sterling is very expensive. I do also speak to, when issues do come up, I kind of do speak to the families about it. And having this kind of evidence at hand, look, your wife has said that this is what she wants to do, are you really going to stand in the way? And having that communication and kind of winning the trust of the families, I think, has also been very important. But then we haven't had any huge issues in Stirling. We've been kind of fortunate in that respect.
It's probably worth saying, actually, that this was a big topic that came up at the regional events, and it's something that we've worked quite hard to try. It was probably one of the areas that people were saying we don't think we've got the right answers about this. And I think that probably the overwhelming lesson that I was picking up in speaking with practitioners and learners about this was that actually there's not one single answer, that actually you need to speak to people and get a sense of your own learners and what your own challenges are there, because actually what you'll find with one group will be different from another group, and one person will be different to another person. So I think it's a really important question. So are we going to say something else?
I was just going to say that all the carrots that you were offering, we have offered, but there's a very intransigent attitude, particularly among a group of husbands.
Yeah. Difficult, Alison,
If I could maybe just come back on that, rather than the micro level, at a slightly more structural level, one thing we know, looking at access to education for women and girls within the Syrian community post-war, is that it's gone from being a society that used to have extraordinary levels of access to one where those levels have really just dipped right down. So I do think continually focusing on this and trying to find ways around it is really important, and to try and get back to levels that are similar to the ones that were available within Syria pre-conflict, because they were excellent. They were very much what societies should aspire to for access to education for women and girls. So I think just understanding the extent to which that has been a change that's come as a result of the conflict rather than is a new normal is quite important.
Thank you. Sorry, Hi.
I wanted to ask Alison a bit more about our wild language. That was all really interesting to me. But I wondered, Alison, if you might be able to say a wee bit more about how using multiple languages might work in the classroom.
Rewilding, it's just a lovely phrase. I mean, it just kind of, you feel a bit freer when you hear it. It's very appealing. So I think for me, it's a phrase that's come out of North American understandings of language ecologies. So a shifting model in research on language at the moment is looking not so much at communicative language teaching, which is what we've very much had as, focus on the 4 skills, but actually saying, language is contextual. It's different in different environments at different times. And so taking that seriously and having an ecological understanding of the context in which language takes place is important. And out of that, the ecological model has come an understanding of, well, the classroom is really only one part of the ecology, and it's really quite a similar ecology all over the world. ESOL classrooms look the same pretty much anywhere you go. So what does it mean to take people outside of the ESOL classroom, out of a monoculture, if you like, and into the sorts of places that we were then just hearing about from Jonathan and from the practice in Stirling, which are very contextual and very much about experiencing museums and theatres and sports clubs and libraries and supermarkets and all those things that are about befriending. And I do think there's an element of what my colleague Steve Thorne would call rewilding in many of those befriending programs. And I think what is really clear to me is that forklift truck language learning, which I would love to learn. I mean, one of my greatest ambitions is to drive a forklift truck. So if we can manage to do this, but that's a really good example of a focused, practical step, which says, these are words you will need to be able to do this. And it isn't higher English. It's actually something you can learn in 4 or 5 weeks. And it's very embodied. Your body's in the context where it's got muscle memory already at work, I'm assuming, that it's about levers and pulleys and buttons. And you learn that much more quickly than when you're only focusing on the cognitive. So when you're embodied, when you're in the environment, when all your senses are engaged, then your language learns to smell and breathe and move, and you're already making those associations. So the context that I do this in is actually watching people learn to dance across many different languages. So maybe 15 different languages, learning a dance piece. And I've watched people from age 75 down to aged 8 learning dance moves when nobody had a language in common, but where mimicry was important and you could start to move. And that embodiment then led to the speaking of the word of the dance move, which meant that 2 days later, everyone's saying that word. So it's actually almost your body first, your environment first, what that's teaching you and how it's teaching you to move, and seeing your language not as, Cartesian dualism, I think, therefore I am, but actually very much out in the world, that's what's happening. So when you go into a supermarket and pulling a bottle of oil off the shelf with a language befriender and saying, well, this is oil, this is zaytun, you've already got a point where you've got that connection and it's linked to something, a third term or an object. So for me, that's about multilingualizing the work. And I think, you're going to hear from Lynn Marr this afternoon and some of the ways that she's just let her language learners loose with their languages. The 6 or 7 languages each individual speaker might speak, and letting those have a space to be creative and to do some teaching back of others. And that enriches the resource that there is generally, and isn't then taking away, is what we're finding from time to learn English in a focus way. And I suppose the other bit of research we've seen is that you have to rest from just being in English all the time if you're a new learner, or certainly for me in other languages. If you don't get that rest, you don't learn it. So I'm having the experience at the moment where I'm sharing my house with a refugee who is an Angolan refugee from who's been in Portugal for the last 20 years, is an EU citizen, and as a result of things to do with universal credit, now just needs somewhere to be for a while she recovers from an operation. I haven't spoken Portuguese for 10 years. My Portuguese is ropey, but it's there, and I think it's there because I've had a chance to rest, because I haven't been constantly trying to only speak Portuguese, but I've got enough to be able to take around the kitchen and the bathroom and the bedroom and how the keys work in the house and where the bus stop is, and that's what we need. So there's something about how much you need, being able to rest from it in the classrooms and having enough rather than making it all, first class degree level perfect, that I think is important. And to me, if you'd asked me 2 years ago when I was speaking here, what would be an optimum of what you would love to see in Scotland, it's what Jonathan was describing, and what I know you're all experiencing, that kind of release a bit from it's got to be in the classroom, but into these other places and letting other people be part of it. And to me, that really is leading practice in the world at the moment.
Thank you. Any other questions? Yes, this lady here, pink and grey.
Carol Irvin, University of Glasgow, working in the English for Academic Study. This is a comment more than a question. It strikes me having worked in ESOL for a long time, how easy it is when ESOL funding runs out for the memory of that project or that initiative to be lost, to be forgotten. Because I worked in Stirling in the mid to late 80s, and there was a major ESOL project which had 9 full-time workers, but it came from European funding. And we had 3 bases, Stirling, Alloa and Clackmannan and Falkirk. And we were out in 3 teams of 2. So in each base, there was a highly qualified ESOL tutor and a community development worker. So the comment about when you said that you needed more time for community development, more learner time, that was actually built in that project. And all that happened was when the money came to an end, the project disappeared.
Yeah, which brings us back to that point I think that Jonathan had about making sure that what we do now has like a kind of a life beyond the Syrian resettlement programme. But
we also had the experience of working with 2 main refugee communities, the Chileans and the Vietnamese boat people. So I also somehow I think surely all of that recollection and all of those experiences should somehow be recorded somewhere, so that we're not always feel as if we're starting from scratch.
Any reflections on that from the panel or further points to add?
Yeah, I mean, that is obviously my fear. I mean, we don't have the answer to it, other than what we're trying to do is involve as many people as we possibly can throughout the council, throughout the community, so that everybody is learning, and the more people that are learning from this, the more that knowledge will stay there, the more people will continue to practice what we're doing. Probably optimistic to think that it's going to have this fantastic longevity that's in Stirling is going to become this utopia for refugees learning English, but that we have to aspire to something. We have to try and do something, and this is what we're doing. So it's a matter of not containing what we're doing within myself and with Duncan, but actually ensuring that the wider community and the wider council are all involved.
Yeah, I think I'd also say that there is a value in reinventing the wheel, because when we make things together, we care about what we've made. We've invested time and energy and resource in it. And I think it's really important, that good projects can carry on and that the funding's sustained, and the project-funded mentality is just so detrimental to so much good work. Now, that sustained core funding we all know is vital, but there is something really important to caring for what you've made together. And I think that is a real sense of energy that I'm seeing around many of the initiatives going on, is that people are making new communities together, and that is integration. That's very much the European and the Scottish model of integration, making something new together, and that you care about what you make, and that helps us want to keep it going. So I think there's 2 messages in there. One is about really good core funding that keeps going, rather than just project funding basis, but also that sense that there's something very human about beginning again and making things together that we care about.
Thank you. We've got time for a few more questions. Yeah, the person at the back.
Hi, Kirsty Forrester from Dundee City Council. It was for Jonathan and Duncan. You talked about the importance of supported and independent learning. I was just interested in how you resource that for the learners. I'm just thinking about how you are trying to create independent learners. I'm just aware that some of our learners are maybe not as independent as they could be.
Well, certainly it's something that we are trying to achieve. And there's basically, it was kind of brought home to me when I was teaching for Forth Valley College, and there was a Syrian in my National 4 class who announced he'd only arrived less than a year before. But he had been doing all the independent learning himself. So he was taking all the resources that he could from the council, he was doing additional homework from them. I mean, he was really taking control of his learning, and it really kind of highlighted to me that there was a slight danger that in Stirling I'd been spoon-feeding individuals, giving them little bite size, which I thought they should cope with, rather than kind of letting them go on with that. One of the things we have done is try and get people to use technology a little bit more. Certainly we gave the learners training on how to use iPads, and then lent them a council iPad so they could then access some of the online learning resources. That has worked to some extent. But I think it's actually just making them more controlled in control of their learning. You know, it's having that individual learning plan for each individual, getting them to verbalise what it is they're wanting to learn and helping them see the difference. They're not just coming to a class because they've got to. If they come to this class, it's going to help them reach whatever goal they're working towards. So that's the thing. So just ensuring that there's lots of available resources and homework and things that they can be working on. Yeah. Although obviously people also have, like, they've got family life as well, and so they've got like a balance, but basically ensuring those that really want to have the opportunity to study more.
Okay. Time for one more question, I think, if anyone. Yep, going to have the person in the very back corner.
Good morning, everybody. My name's Amina, and I'm a support worker in an organisation called Youth Initiative in Dundee, and I also tutor in Arbroath and deliver CPD in Aberdeen. I've just got one comment for Alison rather than a question. Is just to say to you the point about the wild learning and the bilingual. It really has worked, because what I did with one of my sessions in the community learning is my volunteers and with the Syrians, and what we would do, the last 15 minutes of the lesson, it would be a language exchange. So whatever I'd prepared for the lesson, what it would mean is that the students would then take the role of becoming the tutor. That gave them confidence. As you said, it opened up senses. And these three groups that worked together, their confidence level and their progression and resettlement really worked, because they were quite engaged in opening conversations, and language became an integration for them, because they then knew that they could use this skill. And it was simply like, as you said, going to somewhere and then saying, you know, car, for example, you know, this is a car, but in Arabic saying sayyara, or, you know, something like that. It just gave them something, proverbs, idioms, whatever it is. It's just to show that, oh, actually, in our culture, we do it this way. And that, like, you don't then feel like an outcast. You don't feel like, it's almost like we all do the same things. It brings back that human touch. And even in the classroom setting, it just encourages, because the volunteers, of course, they spend a lot of their time, they come. And it also meant that they're learning something by coming there. And it took them into their space, whereas we're welcoming them into our space, and they felt, all right, okay, the volunteers are also learning what we're doing. So I totally agree with you on that one, and I just wanted to share with you all that it does work, you know, and it's brilliant. Yeah. Thank you.
I think that dimension of mutual hospitality in languages is really lovely, and I've certainly seen some of the things that Jonathan was saying were concerning them about boredom actually being overcome in these befriending groups, and that as soon as someone actually is in a position where they're empowered to be the teacher rather than always the recipient and always needing to be grateful, then there's something very confidence boosting, but also the boredom goes immediately. When you're actually having to teach, you can't really have any time, as you all know, for boredom in that situation. You need to be engaged and aware of what's going on and listening and attentive. And so some of those other dimensions, I think, that we're concerned about in the pipeline of processes of getting people into the immigration systems and into the right places at the right time, and those lags where people don't have much time, those opportunities are just very, very humanizing and dignifying, and boost confidence and show people what they are actually able to do on both sides. So that mutuality, I think, is really key. Yeah.
Thank you very much.